Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. And once again, I'm Karen Comer Lowe. I am the Executive Director and Chief Curator here at the Hammonds House Museum. The Hammonds House Museum was established in 1988, and it's the former home of Dr. O.T. Hammonds. Thank you. Should I sing? It's the former home of Dr. O.T. Hammonds. And so Dr. Hammonds was an anesthesiologist and a collector of African American art. And so the museum's art collection is that collection that Dr. Hammonds owned. As I said, it was started in 1988 by Ed Spriggs, who was the former executive director of the Studio Museum in Harlem. We are the only standalone African American museum here in the city of Atlanta that's dedicated to fine art. So please spread the word about us. There's still many people who don't know that we're here and what we do, but we have an art collection that's on view now until the end of January. And after this exhibition goes down, we will have an exhibition of Donald Locke, and that will open in February. So please do follow us on social media, become a member, and spread the word about the Hammonds House Museum. I would like to acknowledge that to recognize that we are standing on indigenous land. This is the land of the Creeks and the Cherokees. If we could all acknowledge that together. And I would also like to thank everyone who is here in person, as well as those who are watching us virtually. So thank you all for being here.
Go out and tell our story. Let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. How justice was our battle and how justice was denied. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. And say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight, that sometimes there are battles that are more than black or white. And I could not put down my sword when justice was my right. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Go out and tell our stories to your daughters and your sons. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. And tell them in our struggles we were not the only ones. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Your sword can be a sermon or the power of the pen. Teach every child to raise his voice, and then, my brothers, then will justice be demanded by 10 million righteous men. Make them hear you. When they hear you, I'll be near you again.
Y'all, that was the amazing sounds of Mr. Christian Magby. He can get another round of applause. Christian Magby, you know, I want to believe that he is of True Colors fame, but in the time that he was our music director for Nina Simone for Women back in 2018, Mr. Magby has gone on to be in movies like One Night in Miami. He is seen on the CW and The Flash and things like that, y'all. We are so lucky to have Christian Magby. He's going to play a couple more songs for us today. So again, thank you, Christian, for being here, breaking your busy schedule. At this time, you all who are there in the audience, in our virtual audience, you're going to be treated to an amazing video talking about the poster image of our Sankofa season. Go back and get it from Mr. Aaron Henderson, the narrative artist who created that. So please enjoy the video. Playing.
I'm a narrative artist. I've been doing art for a long time, over 50 years. And I'm a self-taught artist, which doesn't mean I haven't studied art. And I work primarily in oils on canvas and gouache on paper. I have a dozen different series that I work in, and Sankofa is one of them. I have about a dozen or so paintings in that particular series. Most of my work involves African and African-American culture. I think Jamil may have seen some of the images, and he mentioned to me that this next season was going to be Sankofa, and he asked me if I could do something for it, and so I said, yeah, because I'm already working in that series anyway, dealing with Sankofa. And so in this particular piece, what I did is look at how to incorporate what those next three plays are going to be about. The symbol that's around the bird's neck that looks like a horn, that's an Adinkra symbol, and it's Akobin. It is the war horn, or call to action. So all of these women were called to action to do something, and I think Fannie Lou Hamer was the one that was really had this calling to just get really active. And all the women that are in these plays are all strong black women. You'll see Rosetta Thorpe started as a gospel singer, and she played a guitar. So you'll see a guitar in the bird, and you will also see Fannie Lou Hamer. You see the word vote, which was one of her things that she was really pushing for voting in Mississippi. And you also see the bird is standing on a field of green. Fannie Lou Hamer had an idea of starting something called Freedom Farms, where black folks would grow their own food and take care of themselves on their property. And so that's where the bird is actually standing in that field. And along the bird's back, you'll see these symbols that are also Adinkra symbols, and those are symbols for unity. I kind of tied that into a raisin in the sun. And then the symbol that looks like a comb that is going right, that's on the bird's leg, that's a symbol for femininity, and that is an Adinkra symbol as well. And then along the bird's leg, you'll see the word Bennu written. Bennu is the whole notion of Sankofa comes from Kemet, or ancient Egypt. And that bird has also been referenced in the Greek as the phoenix. And so Atlanta is sometimes called the Phoenix City. So it has that kind of tie in. So I wanted to tie all of that into actually in doing the painting, to try to tie all as many of those elements as I could into the bird.
Much again to the artist, Mr. Aaron Henderson, for his amazing work in that portrait that is going to be on display the entire Sankofa seasons. This is the first of three amazing new commissioned works that Mr. Henderson is going to create for us in our 3-year Sankofa seasons. This one for Go Back and Get It for our 3 shows this year. Y'all, this is our kickoff event for our Sankofa seasons, and welcome back again to In the Continuum, where we're going to talk about the foundations, funding, and future of Black theater. I'm welcomed here by an amazing panel that I want to go ahead and start introducing. The furthest to my right is Ms. Heather Infantry. She is currently the Managing Director of the Transformation Alliance, the former Executive Director of the Generator, and the founder of a task force for philanthropic reparations. Heather, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me, Jamil.
To her left is Dr. Carlton Millett. He is a former professor at Spelman and a renowned author, especially with his scholarship around Black theater. Dr. Millett, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for asking me.
Of course, of course, of course. To his left, we have Miss Diana Jones-Stevens. She is currently the executive director of Via Theatrical, and she is also one of the founding members of Jomandi Productions, and we're really thankful to have Miss Diana here as well.
I'm delighted to be here.
And to her left and to my immediate right, we have Miss Tina Fears. She's one of the founding members of Black ATL Inc., advocacy organization here for Black artists here in Atlanta. And she's also a business owner, entrepreneur, and she has founded Fearless Movement. And we're really excited to have Tina here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so by way of introduction, I'm going to start over here with Tina, then I'll go over to Heather. Tell me a little bit about your early experiences. Go back in your memory. This is season, go back and get it. Go back in your memory and tell us about your first experiences with Black arts. Tina, I'm going to start with you.
And I've been thinking about this since you told us this was going to be a question. I come from a creative family, you know, Black people that are just brilliant in every sense of being artists in music, songwriting, dancing, performing, and that's in my own household. So it was introduced to me as a very little girl, you know, recording studios and all that being around me. But then when I think about on a national level, I can remember watching, you know, The Cosby Show and watching A Different World and just images of Blackness and Black excellence that was very different for me because I'm from Los Angeles. So what I saw immediately in the classroom weren't people that looked like me. So I had it at home, but then I also had something to aspire to by those images that I saw on television. Those are my earliest memories.
Same to you, Heather. Early experiences with Black arts, be it in Atlanta, be it national. We know that you bring some international flavor here as well. Tell us about those early Black arts experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate and love the question. And I grew up in Toronto, so it's a very white city. So I came to Atlanta when I was 19, and one of my earliest, fondest memories is the National Black Arts Festival in 1996. Avery Brooks was the artistic director. And the opening ceremony was at King Chapel at Morehouse College. So you got to imagine for someone coming from a city like Toronto to be in this uber Black city where 2 weeks there's Black art. And the director of Sankofa was in the audience that night. I met Ulu Dara, Naz's father, at one of the performances, Amiri Baraka. Kevin Powell was just starting out with this poetry cipher. Radcliffe Bailey had just graduated from Atlanta College of Art. I mean, it was just an explosive, amazing experience. And even to be here at Hammonds house in this enchanted garden, I spent so much time here in those early years. So yeah, Black art in Atlanta left an indelible mark for sure.
I love that story. And Dr. Millett, you have, you know, written so much scholarship around Black arts. I would love to know just from you, what are your early Black arts experiences when you think about and go back and get that memory?
Well, when you emailed us that question, I had to do some serious thinking about that because it was a long, long time ago. I was literally born on a historically Black college campus.
All right.
The campus that is now called the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. Both of my parents were administrative staff there when they met and married, and then along came me. And my first very vague recollection, I know I was in what they called nursery school. This was pre-kindergarten. For some reason that I have no idea why, my mother took me into this huge room, and there was singing and dancing going on the stage. And it was enjoyable to me, but I didn't know what was going on. Many years later, I thought about it, and I tried to do some research on what had happened that was this indelible memory for me. And it was a play that was probably written by, but definitely directed by, now I'm going to block on his name, Mac. All I can think of is Mac.
The ancestors will find the rest of it.
I'll think of the rest of it. But anyway, he was I believe, the first African American to get a Master's of Fine Arts degree from Yale. He was a graduate of Morehouse, and he was on the faculty at what was then Arkansas A&M. And that was literally my first experience of seeing a black performance. And there are lots of others that, because I too come from one of those families where there are a lot of people who have pursued the arts in various ways. I grew up in Kansas City, and music was a much more respectable outlet for African Americans than theater was back in the early 50s. So I was not, the idea of me going into theater was not considered to be a good idea back
At
then.
that time.
But it was like, well, that's good preparation for law school.
There it is.
But anyway.
Well, and Ms. Diane, I wanted to ask you that same question. Early experiences with black arts, black organizations. Tell us a little bit about what kind of started that ball rolling for you.
Well, I was born and raised in New York, and my first experience with the black arts was really Negro Ensemble Company.
Right.
And we used to go see all the different plays. You know, my mother was adamant about exposing us to all forms of art, and that was thrilling to me. When I came here, there was the Neighborhood Arts Center, and there was 7 other black theater companies here, small black theater companies. And the first piece I ever saw in Atlanta was at, I think it was People Survival Theater with Elizabeth Omalami.
Yeah.
So that's been my first experiences with black theater organizations.
And as we talk about going back and get it, we want to make sure that we acknowledge you brought an amazing name into the space with Miss Omalami, and just the amazing legacy that she comes from. So thank you for that. Now, you talked about moving from New York down here to Atlanta, and while there were black theaters, there was a thriving black theater community. You and your members of your family also started Jamani Productions. And I want to talk a little bit and ask you, what was the inspiration in founding your own black arts organization, especially here in the fertile ground of Atlanta?
Well, I wasn't even remotely interested in starting or founding anything, but my brother, Tom Jones, he had just graduated from Amherst, and he wanted his own theater company. So my mother, my sister, and I said, oh, okay, we'll do that. And so we did all the things to set up the corporation, get a 501c3, and around the dining room table, we started building the company. We asked friends that we had come help us. We had a really good, strong foundation of family and friends that joined together with us. And that's really how it got started. So we fumbled around and tried to figure this thing out. And Tom and Marsha Jackson, we said, okay, you all do the art and we'll do the business.
Right.
Because artists don't necessarily make good business people. And that's how we did it. And we fumbled and we learned and we figured out, okay, now we need a place, we need audience, we need money. There was this overwhelming sense of what we needed. And so in the beginning, we were all working, so we wrote checks. Every month we'd write a little check. And then when we had enough money, then Tom and Marsha could go and put on a play. And the Neighborhood Arts Center became invaluable to them and, to us. And it just grew from there. We got, at some point, both Tom and Marsha were writers and actors. So they were able to perform, write, do what they needed to do. And we got an agent for touring, and a touring agent, and that brought in money until we could figure out how do you do grants, and where are the grants, and where are they, and all the things that are required.
Yeah. You talked about some of that, just like the foundation, and there was an amazing community there. And some of that community, Atlanta is no different from a lot of southern cities where the HBCU talent really helps create the ground which a lot of black arts organizations kind of come up from. Dr. Millett, I have a question for you, just in your work at Spelman, but also in your work at HBCUs. Can you talk a little bit about what that HBCU training ground meant for the city of Atlanta, but just black arts in general? What kind of role did HBCUs play in some of our early foundations of black theaters?
Well, I think probably the single most important thing about HBCUs is that they gave black performing artists an opportunity to be themselves and to not get demeaned for simply being who they were. And that gets done in very subtle ways. I mean, I'm not talking about, hatred. I'm not talking about race hatred. I'm talking about, well, what you do just isn't quite up to snuff. And there are subtle ways that people manage to say that. And to be able to develop who you are as an artist in a community that, first of all, is used to storytelling the way you tell stories, is used to the kind of music that you like to listen to, is used to hearing the kind of poetry that you like to hear. It's a very different phenomenon in terms of just being able to have, I hear people talking about being courage. I never thought of it as courage. The first time I said, I can design scenery, or the first time I said, I can write a play, but it was because of that environment, that nurturing environment, that it never occurred to me that doing it was an act of courage. I just did it. And I know lots of other people who did the same thing. Some of my rich and famous former students went through a similar kind of process. Also, some of my former students who are not rich and famous, but who are very successful,
Right.
Went through a process of just being able to know that the fact that they were who they were wasn't going to count as a strike against them.
Right. We talk about at True Colors the importance of being able to allow black artists to create in their own context, and you just underlined and underscored just how important that HBCU training is in creating a space where people know your flavor. We talk about a little bit about the cultural fluency that happens when black artists are allowed to create in their own space. And I know, Tina, that you went to an HBCU. You have a Clark Atlanta legacy. Talk a little bit about just what that felt like for you, getting that early education at Clark, especially being here in Atlanta.
Yeah, Clark Atlanta, go Panthers, is a huge part of who I am. And though I transferred to the Art Institute, like Dr. Millett said, it was home. I was able to be me in the totality of who I am. I was nurtured. There was an environment where even my failures were embraced. And man, I'm feeling old school up here talking, because I know some of my newer artist friends, sometimes even when we're under the tutelage or the direction of a black director or a black MD, there's just a different finesse that comes with having that leadership, having that HBCU, kind of whip behind you a little bit. There's a greater expectation. And so when I went to the Art Institute, it was very different for me because there was a lack of care. Padro Harris was my director for Simply Simone at TO, and he always talked about care, handling our art with care. There is a finesse, there's a soft and gentle hand in which we have to tell our stories. And those are things I attribute to my experience at Clark.
And Heather, you talked about moving here from Toronto, but in your early experiences being bathed in the excellence, the black excellence, starting from the National Black Arts Festival and all of the amazing art experiences that you had after that. Can you just speak to a little bit about what that care felt like for you in moving here to Atlanta and being treated with so much care by black artists?
I love these questions because I haven't thought and reflected on these things for so long, but I didn't go to HBCU, but Atlanta was an HBCU experience, and I didn't know how powerful that was until I had it. I didn't know what I didn't have, what was lacking in the formative years of my education. I didn't get my first black teacher until I came to university here. So I went through 13 years of schooling without ever having a person in front of a classroom that looked like me. And I come to Atlanta, and it's not just like I'm enveloped in this like space of blackness, it's the diversity of blackness that oftentimes I don't think is talked enough about. I come from a Jamaican background, and I came to a city full of Caribbean people, full of people from across the South, full of black folks from the North, full of folks from West Africa and other places around the world, like this overflowingness of the diaspora, and being represented in every facet of life, right? Political leadership that was black, CEOs that were black, poor people that were black, you know, all of these things I didn't see and experience, and what it has done for my identity and my sense of self-confidence and self-worth is immeasurable. And to raise two girls, I'll never forget when Keisha Lance Bottoms was during her inauguration. It was at the King Chapel, and I took my two girls at the time. And she was inaugurated at the King Chapel on Morehouse campus, with Felicia Moore also being instated as city council president. And then there were a number of black judges and other council folks. And just again, for my girls who live in a time where they had a black president, it's just, that's Atlanta. That's Atlanta.
And this richness, Ms. Diana, is what you all founded Jumandi in. And you all are part of the legacy that True Colors is proud to be in the continuum of. I just want to spend a little bit of time and just sharing with our audience just the amazingness that was Jumandi and the spirit of Jumandi Productions that lives on today.
Well, we were really very fortunate. When we started, there were 7 black theater companies. And you had the CETA money, the Comprehensive Education and Training Act, which allowed so many of the black organizations to exist. I think one of our strengths was because we had 2 artistic directors who were writers and performers, we were able to tour and bring in enough revenue to cover the season here. Also, having to decide who are you as an organization, and I think that's key. Who are you and what do you want to do? And our strength was that we could do new works by our own artistic directors, but also new works by any number of other writers, black writers around the country, whether they're young or whether they were already established, and then build on that. We had to also look at audience. Who is our audience, and how do we reach out? It was amazing the number of people who came to the theater that had never been to a play, other than like maybe whatever they saw in high school. And so it was reaching out and speaking to that community of a diverse community, a diverse black community, but also a white community that was interested in our stories. And we wanted to tell our stories in unique and different ways. And we were very successful at doing that. We became the 3rd largest black theater company in the country. And we were able to, you know, outlive a lot of the others who were not able to survive. Ultimately, we weren't either, but I think when I look at our legacy, I think it's the legacy of all of those artists, musicians, stage managers, costumers, who had an opportunity to actually get experience, you know, professional experience that could then translate to other jobs in other cities and other states and countries.
You know, Jumandi and the amazing legacy has touched True Colors. You know, our very own production manager, Lisa Watson, had a big role in Jumandi. I know Kenny Leon, our founding artistic director, touched Jumandi in so many different ways. But one thing that you talked about was new work. And before we go here to break, Dr. Millett, I want to talk a little bit about just some of the new work that you were able to create with some of those famous and maybe lesser known but still very important artists that you helped inspire and nurture. Can you talk a little bit about some of the new work generation that you were able to do in nurturing some of these HBCU artists?
Sure, I'll be glad to, but I want to also mention that Andrea Fry, who's going to be directing the next production at True Colors.
I owe you a check for that one, yes.
Was part of Jumandi. And before that, was a co-founder with Young Hughley of Black Image Theater. And just so people think that this black theater thing is something new, I have a production photograph of Atlanta University Summer Theater 1938 production of Owen Dodson's, now I'm going to block on the name of the Divine Comedy.
Okay.
It's a comedy about Father Divine.
All right. All right. All right.
And so black theater in Atlanta is not something that started in the 60s or 70s.
Right.
And a lot of people think it is, and I just wanted to. So at any rate, to get to your question, one of the things that I found as a director that I constantly heard from my white professors was, well, there just aren't any good black plays out there. So my first thought was, well, maybe I can at least do a Langston Hughes play. They can't not Langston Hughes.
Right.
But then I started looking for things, and part of the difficulty, and Douglas Turner Ward used to talk about this too, he had the difficulty finding black plays. And it's not that they didn't exist, it's that nobody made them accessible.
Right.
So in addition to Barbara and I doing plays that we wrote at Spelman, we also did several plays by other black playwrights during that period. So that the students were in the habit of doing plays by living playwrights who actually showed up at rehearsal and made changes in the script and stuff like that, which I think is one of the things that helped them when they then went into professional theater, because most professional theater is new work.
Right.
And so they weren't intimidated by the playwrights saying, these are the changes. Most people coming out of college who have had the traditional experience are intimidated by, I've been memorizing the lines and now you're changing the lines. So I think that was one important aspect of it. I can't talk about our new work without mentioning Samuel L. Jackson and LaTanya Richardson and Bill Nunn.
Bill Nunn.
And one of the new playwrights that I directed her first play in Atlanta was Pearl Cleage. And they were all in school together. It was a wonderful time, and there have been other moments like that in Atlanta, and I happen to know for a fact there have been moments like that at some other HBCUs. I mean, I know people from Howard who have had similar kinds of experiences, and people from North Carolina A&T who've had similar kinds of experiences. And by the way, when I was at Spelman, we had auditions, and students from Clark and Morris Brown were free to audition, and got cast. So some of my former students were Morris Brown students and Clark students. The woman who was really sort of the leading diva of the Atlanta University Summer Theater for when I arrived as a 16-year-old was Georgia Allen, who was a Clark alumnus. So in those days, the AU Center was truly the AU Center.
Absolutely.
I mean, like Spike Lee majored in mass comm, which was totally located at Clark. So that, and Morehouse theater majors took all their theater courses at Spelman. So there was this kind of interaction that made new work doable. I mean, it wasn't, doing a new play wasn't scary.
Right. And
You
it is-
know,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, it's that legacy that we talk about when we are ushering in just not only the Sankofa seasons, but as we talk about what's possible after this break and another selection from the amazing Christian Magby. I want to talk a little bit about some of the circumstances around the funding of Black arts organizations, why there have been some challenges in the longevity and establishing longevity for some of our Black arts organizations, and then what we want to put out for the future as we create more new works and more legacies, more storytellers for the 21st century of Black theater in the next 75 years. But let's get some more time from Mr. Magby. What you got for us, sir?
Let's see what we got. Let's see what we got. I think I'm feeling good.
Good.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, and I'm feeling good. Fish in the sea, you know how I feel. River running free, you know how I feel. Blossom on the tree, oh no, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, and I'm feeling good. Dragonfly out in the sun, you know what I mean, don't you know? Butterflies all having fun, you know what I mean. Sleep in peace when day is done, you know what I mean. And this old world is a new world and a bold world for me. Yeah. Stars when you shine, you know how I feel. Scent of the pine, you know how I feel. Freedom is mine, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me. And I'm feeling so good. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good.
Yes. Yes, Christian has us feeling good here, Mr. Magby. Thank you for that. And just this trip back to where we are, to the foundations of our own Black theater experiences, Black theater here in Atlanta, but really talking about Black theater nationally has us all feeling really good. And some of the ways in which we wanted to continue our organization's legacies happen to be around funding. That is one of the pitfalls of the nonprofit structure. We recognize that, especially for Black arts organizations, studies show that for Black arts organizations, we receive so little % of our annual operating budget from contributions from individuals or from box office. Most of our funding comes from government organizations, foundations, to support the work that we do. And oftentimes, when the flavor of the month changes, as it has often happened, Black arts organizations often get the short end of that stick. Heather, I know you've done a lot of work around philanthropic reparations here in the city of Atlanta. talking about the inequity that we have seen in funding for Black arts organizations over the last 3 decades. And I just want to give you a little bit of an opportunity to talk about how, not just the disparity, because we know that to be true, but what are some of the effects of that disparity and how have they played out over the last 3 decades here in Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, it plays out in so many ways. I think the first and most obvious one is that we relegate Black art to just be for Black people, and in doing so, we exclude people from the very rich narratives and stories that come from our traditions that could very much be useful and helpful in navigating the tumultuous waters that we find ourselves right now with race relations. I think when we look at Black organizations themselves, the impact that we've seen has been deeply wounding to administrators and artists alike who look at these particular systems of funding and have been deluded into thinking that they are for them. And when they are denied the funding, it really comes back to them as a personal sort of slight of incompetence that they sometimes internalize, which is in fact not the case. It is in fact that these were never really designed to serve the work that you do. And I think we have this very difficult challenge with the work that Black artists are compelled and inspired to do, because so much of it is born out of a need to provide visibility where there is none, to create representation, to be an outlet to think about resistance and liberation, which oftentimes is at odds with the philanthropic dollar when it particularly comes from white communities, whose funding and wealth is generated through our oppression and our subjugation. So these things are diametrically opposed in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of work I think that we need to do internally as a community to start thinking about other models, other modes, other ways that we support the work. And for me personally, I think a lot of that is directed by the work itself, that when the work is relevant, when it is urgent, there will be an audience that finds it because they need it.
You know, when you're talking here, there are moments of conflict that I find that as a Black arts organization here in Atlanta, True Colors has actually benefited from foundations, and whether that be through our white adjacency, whether that be through the celebrity of our co-founder or what have you, True Colors has benefited in many ways. But yet and still, when we look at our annual operating budgets, our peer arts organizations, our annual operating budget makes up sometimes half as much, in some ways even a tenth of the size of some of our peers that we are competing with, in the sense of earned revenue as butts in the seats, dollars through the door, but also for these grant opportunities, right? The fact that we have consistently produced work by, for, featuring Black artists, we don't get the same type of dollars and funding as other arts organizations do for their tepid production of Black arts
Call it what it is, it's mediocre.
Of black artistry. Heather, I want to talk just a little bit about what that is, right? Because that can sometimes be a mindset of scarcity, saying that there are only but so many limited dollars. But we know, especially in the flood of funding that has happened over the last 2 years or so, that there is actually a world of abundance. And how can we talk about and advocate for more abundance in funding for Black arts organizations? Because we recognize, hey, rising waters lifts all boats. It is not just okay for True Colors to get a little bit of that funding if other Black arts organizations here in Atlanta and nationally don't get that same funding. So how can we advocate for more abundance here in funding communities, and also encouraging more support from individual donations as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that advocacy piece really comes from how we hold leadership of these funding institutions accountable, especially now as more and more institutions are sort of jumping on the equity bandwagon. That creates a really interesting entry point for us to look and examine what grant-making processes are. And you know, True Colors and Atlanta Music Project and Bal Ethnic and some of these other groups that kind of are the mainstays of some of the benefit of funding, oftentimes I think is part of those systems, right, that reinforce this feeling of internalized incompetency because, well, we funded these organizations and they're Black and they've checked the box, and why can't you? And You know, I always judge a funder not by the exceptions that they make, but by the many people that they support in a particular area. And with regards to Black organizations, I mean, I'm a fundraiser, right? I've been doing fundraising now for the last 15 years, and quite honestly, my craft has been honed in such a way to appeal to white liberals. I actually do not know what the compelling message and data point and talking point is to the Black patron, because so much of my energy has been towards telling this deficit narrative of a Black reality to appeal to white guilt. And that's not going to work in the Black community, because we've all sort of struggled and we've had to overcome, and so that story of overcoming just doesn't appeal to us. And that's why I think much of the work goes back to the art itself, that if it is captivating, if it is relevant, if it is urgent, if it's reflective of right now, and not necessarily yesteryear, but right now in the context of music and culture and vernacular, then there will be an audience for it, right? And we've seen certain Black artists in our community, particularly in the commercial space, proving that time and time again. But some of it, I think, has to do with this unlearning of these conventional models of how we produce the work and these canons that we are so beholden to. I believe in preservation, it's important, but I also think there's a whole future ahead of us and stories related to that need to be told, and that people right now are yearning for. Not just Black folks, but everybody is yearning for these stories that really only come from us, because the white story, the white canon, man, it's been told. Now they're retelling these stories 3 and 4 times again because they have nothing new to say, and we've only scratched a tiny bit of the surface of our own stories.
And Ms. Diana, you in Jumandi, again, so influential in telling those stories, creating new opportunities, telling relevant stories to the Atlanta theater community. But we've also talked about, hey, you know, Jumandi faced periods of uncertainty. Can you talk a little bit about just how did the inequity in funding play a role in the entirety of Jumandi's existence?
Well, there was never a time when there wasn't a struggle, obviously. In the earlier years, it was a little bit easier in terms of the funding, the granting, because you had the National Endowment for the Arts had a category for new and emerging arts organizations. And so we were able to tap into that. And once you were able to prove yourself, then you were able to go into the major category. And then there were arts federations in the different regions. So if you were going into a region, then that arts federation would help support the presenting organization. As time went on, that money dwindled and dwindled and dwindled, and then you're really in a situation, and you know, then it becomes very roller coaster, because you're going after funding from both the corporate side and the government side. And at times you're in, and so you're getting quite a few grants, quite a few donations, and then other times you're not. And at one point, there was a very heavy emphasis on the major organizations doing multicultural work. And so therefore, money was poured into those major organizations. And what you found was, oh, well, they're doing a Black play, so you're not as relevant because we have a Black play over here. And that Black play is going to be what their audience can tolerate, not necessarily what your audience, you know, is looking for. And so then you're on a down, and then you're back up. And I think part of it was teaching our audiences that only 40 or 50% of our funding comes from ticket sales.
Right.
That you have to raise 60%. And to do that, we need not only that funding from the government and the funding from the corporate structure, but you also need individual donors. And you need to be able to partner. And sometimes we just had to be creative. You know, you had to look at it and say, okay, we cannot compete with some of these other organizations. So what are we going to do to be able to provide the revenue to get us through this season or through this month? Sometimes it was that serious.
Yeah.
I don't think it's changed. I think it's gotten more difficult for black arts organizations because at a time, black organizations were more in. And so every corporation, every government entity felt obligated to make sure that some dollars were spread out. I think today it's not so much that case.
Yeah, and just for a frame of reference, can you talk to us a little bit about just what years are we talking about as far as Jumandi's operation? You all were founded in what year and then ceased operations?
We were founded in 1978, October 1978, and we ended in the year 2000.
Great, thank you, yeah. You know, and you talked about that, right? Like in the 90s, we know the proliferation of black films and things like that in the late 80s and early 90s, that was multicultural work was big and important, and there was a lot of grant funding. And over the years, especially as we turned into the new millennium, some of that funding started to taper off, right? We saw other organizations get into that game. And that's why I wanted you to be specific about those years, because I think we can really just kind of trace that as we see, you know, Hollywood is not always a harbinger of what things are happening in the other world. But, you know, we started to see, okay, now that things are in, we don't have to fund and support in that kind of way. But even right now in 2021, we find that we are still having some of those issues, that the cultural legacy organizations, in some spaces we call those BITOC organizations, Black, Indigenous, Theaters of Color, those organizations are also struggling. Tina, I want to talk to you a little bit about Black ATL Inc. And you know, you all have not, you've chosen against the nonprofit structure. Hats off to you all. Yes. But funding is still a challenge for you in doing some of the advocacy work and showing up and doing work at elementary schools. And how has this challenge around funding and access and people operating in a scarcity mindset affected the work that you all are trying to do?
It's been a tremendous challenge. We saw in 2020, we talked about relevance. I'll use the term on trend. It was trendy to support, to be woke, to acknowledge Black arts. And so we've seen, even from what opened up in 2020 to what opened up during the grant cycle this year, be tremendously different. Okay, so if, you know, we were able to receive grant funds last year, now it's almost been curated to exclude certain organizations, to exclude emerging artists. And it's a challenge. You know, we are committed to the work that we're doing at Black, which stands for Black Leaders Advocating for Cultural Theater. One of my co-founders, Brittany Manyweather, is here. Marcus Hopkins Turner is our other co-founder. And so a lot of what we are doing, I said on the podcast, is, you know, we're packing stuff up in our cars. We are reaching out to our personal networks because we have a very specific mission, a specific goal that we are trying to accomplish, and we know that there is a need there. The challenge is to present something or to produce something and it's effective, but then we need the support so that it can have that staying power. We don't want things to be one-offs. We don't want it to be, oh, that was great, they did it, and it sold out. We want to be able to kind of create an incubator where work is constantly being created, and when, you know, if True Colors is hired everybody they're hiring, that our artists have somewhere else so they can go where they are safe, where we talked about that HBCU experience, where they can grow. And it's a challenge. Heather is a huge advocate for artists here, and her work has been tremendous, but you can tell there is the hands are getting tighter. You know, now we're not trending, to go back to my original statement. So we were trending before, everybody was BLM, everybody was, you know, how do we prove that we are not anti-Black, but ultimately we need the funds so that we can keep these conversations going, so that we can educate people about the legacy that you all are speaking about. I've never even been here to the Hammonds house. There's so much that artists who are not from Atlanta, who weren't blessed to experience the AUC, who are coming here because Atlanta is at the center of everything, and there has to be some type of bridge where they are, one, informed about the rich heritage and the history, but then they also have access to be a part of these new works, these new stories, so that we can keep this community thriving and alive so that it doesn't die off.
You know, and I think it's an important thing to say, right? Overcoming adversity is part of the cultural DNA that we as members of the diaspora have, but struggle does not have to be our birthright. We don't have to have this struggle against oppression. It does not have to be our story. Our stories don't have to be limited in that way. We can and we deserve abundance. And I keep on using that word abundance because I really believe it. I really believe in abundance. And one thing that I'm feeling particularly challenged at as a leader of a smaller nonprofit in the grander scheme of things, that we have a cap, unfortunately, that has been placed on the type of work that we're able to do because of funding. There are arts administrators that have been trained up at True Colors, or when we go out and try to find people who can help us take our work to the next level, grow us as an organization, that we have trouble competing, like you said, Miss Diana, with some of these other arts organizations because we don't have the funds to pay people at the level in which they deserve to be paid. Dr. Millette, I know you and your wife, Dr. Barbara, who I'm so thankful that you made sure that we announce her name and share her name in the space. I want to talk, like, how have you worked with artists that you have nurtured, who go out into the world and maybe feel some of those limits on the type of work that they want to do, or their desire to work inside cultural organizations, whether they're starting them or working inside of them? How do you nurture, mentor artists who are feeling some of that cap on their abilities?
Yeah, I think it's important to begin by recognizing that part of the structure of the cap is a black stereotype. So if you are telling a story that's not part of that stereotype, then you are told, well, that's not commercial, or that's not the white, essentially the white community is not buying that. And if the white community isn't buying it, then the major funders are not going to fund it. They will find some black institution that doesn't contradict the stereotype, and the stereotype is real. The stereotype is based on a reality, but you use the word diversity. It's a small percentage of the total black experience. And they don't want to hear about, I have been told, for example, Barbara and I wrote a play about a president of a historically black college. Nobody wants to know about what life is like for the president of a historically black college, because it doesn't fit the stereotype. And a lot of our stuff, because it's about, we happen to have been fortunate enough so that our own personal experiences happen to be more about a diverse, middle class, upwardly mobile, not only in the United States, but in the Caribbean and in West Africa, black people. That's who raised us and who we knew, so that's who we write about. The people who do the funding don't want to hear that. Now, so even when you have students, former students, who now have made a lot of money for white people, people talk about how much money Samuel L. Jackson has made in terms of what the films gross. But how much of that money ends up in Sam's pocket? So that there's, in addition to having the capability of doing what some of my former students who are actors have been able to do and command a certain amount of money, getting into the producing end of this business, particularly at the commercial level. The last time I checked, there was one black female who happens to be a Spelman alum who regularly produces plays on Broadway. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because producers don't have the money in their pocket. They have to go out and convince other people to invest money in a production. And so the problem becomes, even for example, when I've talked to black producers about producing my work, the problem is their funders feel like they can make money by simply recycling the old marketing plan. They are not willing to try to develop a new marketing plan that taps into money in the black community or money in the Hispanic community or whatever. It's like, we've got this marketing plan, it's worked fine for us so far, and we're gonna keep doing it that way. And your play doesn't fit that.
You know, I want to talk a little bit, y'all. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put your questions into the question and answer here on the live chat. Before I go over to the question and answer, Heather, I want to talk a little bit. We have talked a lot and navigated a lot about just a predominantly white power structure that controls the purse strings. But we know, especially here being in Atlanta, we know that black wealth, black philanthropy is huge, right? And there's opportunities here. I want to talk a little bit, Heather. What work have you all done in philanthropic reparations, but also just in your work in and leading so many arts organizations? What can we do to continue to inspire more black philanthropy? One thing that I've found that has been really amazing, there's a gentleman named Curtis King who has done a lot of amazing work with True Colors over the year that has started to inspire students to put a little bit of money to the arts in elementary school, right? Giving them a couple of dollars here and then giving them that sense. Just like how when I was young, my mother put a couple of pieces of coins in my hand so that when the communion plate was being passed around, that I knew that it was important to give to the church. What other ways can we inspire more black philanthropy? Again, this is not saying that black people don't give money. I hope that no one is picking that up, because black people give a lot of money. What we're talking about is inspiring more black philanthropy so that black arts organizations like Tina's, the Jamandis and the future Jamandis of the world don't have to solely compete and be at the behest and the will of white philanthropy.
Thank you for the question. I think there is a opportunity because yes, black folks are very philanthropic, and when it comes to the church, that is where we've devoted so much of our dollars. And so I think there's an interesting opportunity with churches to explore, both in terms of dollars, but also in terms of facilities. When you think about some of the mega churches that exist here in Atlanta, the kind of sort of technological infrastructure that they have in place for broadcasting so many of their services and how they were able to turn on a dime during COVID, I think provides a really unique opportunity that we really need to explore. And I think also thinking about where we do art as a way to think about the infrastructure of creative expression. So I think so much of what we do is based on sort of these white realities. And when you talk about Sankofa and going back to our origin, where art exists is in community, where people are. So in your churches, at your barbershop. So this idea that art is more portable, I think, helps to address this question and opportunity of sustainability and support. Is a thought that I have around how we begin to connect to philanthropic dollars. And I think also turning on the head this notion that when we're sitting around a room and we're thinking about who's gonna support this work, our tendency is always to think about people that are rich, right? The top 1%. And there's something really backwards about that. This idea that a person of privilege only has the opportunity and privilege of investing in these things, when investing in creative expression and in your community assets should be something for everybody to enjoy. So just even simply the conversations that we spark with people in our communities, in our neighborhoods, at our schools, at our workplace, that we make this very invitational to everybody, that everybody matters, whether they're giving $1 or they're giving $500,000, right? I think getting back to our origin of community-centered relationships and that sort of thing is something that we have been distanced from because of our adherence to this model that doesn't have us in mind to begin with and continues to dilute and set back the work. So in this spirit of Sankofa, let's just go back to how we did things, which was together.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I want to take this opportunity to say, hey, at True Colors, we will take it whether it's $1, whether it's $1,000, whether it's $10,000. you can go online, truecolorstheater.org/donate, and we'll take any dollar that you have. We have Alex here, who is our new donations officer, who will help you, whether you're here in our audience or whether you're online. Go ahead and make that donate. We do have a couple of people here who are in our audience. We are trying to keep things, as you can see, we are outdoors. We are trying to be compliant with COVID. Y'all, there is still a pandemic. If you have not, well, I'm going to encourage you, take this opportunity to encourage you to go get vaccinated. Yes, we want to be able to still continue to do our programming. That's why we've made these accommodations. But I want to get back to live theater, to breathing the same art as the curtain goes up and we take in these black stories. So please go get vaccinated so we can get back into the theater. Come back November 30th when we are with Marie and Rosetta. I want us to be live, and the only way we get from here to there is that we go get vaccinated. I do want to open it up if there are anybody here in our live audience with a question for our panel. I want to open up this opportunity. I also have some questions here from our virtual audience. So one of the questions from an Antonio Jones from Tennessee asks, how can we make sure that new playwrights can have access to black leaders like you all? So as we move into the future conversation, future part of our conversation, I open this up to anybody. What are ways that we can make sure that new playwrights have access, the word Tina has used a couple of different times, how can we ensure that there's more access to black leaders, black artists, and things like that? Maybe even if you all want to speak to the ways in which you have been successful in providing, getting access to black leaders and black producers. That question's for anybody.
Everybody seems to be looking at me. Let's see. I think one of the issues with access, I'm going to turn the question upside down. I'm retired. I'm a retired theater professor, actually a professor of theater and Africana studies. Occasionally, I have been called upon to mentor somebody since I retired and moved back to Atlanta. I have reached out to people as far away as back up in Connecticut where I was when I retired in one direction, and St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up in Missouri. Part of the problem from my perspective is just getting people, particularly people who are used to dealing with a predominantly white educational environment. I have run into people who were afraid to talk to me because they thought I was going to treat them the same way their white former professors treat them. I mean, it's real, you know.
It is real.
And so I don't know how to reach out to where these people are, and these people don't know how to reach out to me. That's a problem. Maybe one of the solutions is for me to try to use both myself and some other old folks that I know to maybe be available via the system that, well, Instagram. My daughter made me set up an Instagram account. So I'm on Instagram.
And we tagged him. We tagged Dr. Millet's Instagram page. So if you were looking for him, find him
and
on
by the
Instagram.
way, if you want to reach me on Instagram, don't go to Carlton Mollett. Go to Afrocentric Theater.
Right.
That's really me. That's me. That's not the name. And actually, we had to change the spelling to make it fit. So it's actually Afrocentric THTR.
Yes.
But that's the Instagram account. I think that there have one of the problems also is that people of my age group aren't as energetic as they used to be. And so
Miss Diana took
well, you're not quite of my
offense in
age group yet. Okay, you're getting there, but you're not there yet. It's like I don't have the energy to, I guess, behave like I did when Sam and Latanya and Bill Nunn and that crowd were around. But I'm willing to do what I can do. And I feel a particular obligation because there were some people that I was scared to reach out to. I mean, I'm sure that most of your audience probably never heard of Abram Hill, but Abram Hill directed a Broadway hit in the 40s.
Yes.
Abram Hill wrote the most popular play to be produced in Harlem in the 30s and the 40s, play entitled Strivers Row. When I wanted to do Strivers Row and I reached out to Abe, he said, oh, the first time I ever performed in public was in Sale Hall Chapel at Morehouse College.
Oh, that's good stuff.
And all of a sudden, I had theater parents. Abe and his wife, Ruth, reached out to Barbara and I, and, you know, it's not that I'm trying to be, you know, like I said, I don't have a lot of energy, but it's not because I don't want to, it's not one of those big me, little you things, it's just I'm tired. And I know that there are other similar people literally all over the country,
Right.
who have worked in this business their entire lives, who are there. If you just, you know, reach out to them on social media or maybe even a phone call, for goodness sake. I mean, they still make those things, you know.
I heard.
Well,
you know,
I would like to add to that.
Time.
I think it's also essential that the black organizations that are out there at least carve out a number of places for new artists to be. The one thing that we had in our favor with Jamandi was that's what we did, all new plays. So we got, you know, hundreds of scripts every year, which made it difficult. But a lot of times when you're looking at the seasons, the plays that are being done by existing playwrights or existing plays. And so I think it would be incumbent upon the organization to say, you know what, we're going to devote 2 slots out of 6, 5, whatever, to new work, and reach out and let people know so that artists, writers who have pieces at least can send the script and you can see, is this something I want to produce? But I think there has to be a place where that material is sent and people know, okay, let me send it to True Colors.
Right. Tina, you want to get in?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We did Black presented a short film festival, and we noticed during the pandemic there wasn't live theater happening, but artists still wanted to create. We needed to create because of the climate, and we found by creating a platform, we got people throughout the Southeast, and probably would have been more if we would have expanded that really just needed a space. So to this gentleman in Tennessee, I would say, you know, shoot your shot and don't necessarily wait for the big leaders to say you are welcome here. Go ahead and start creating that momentum. Now here's the marketing stuff that's gonna start coming out. Create a conversation around your work on your own independently. Make your own noise, because we are in the tech age where you can probably get a lot further if you shoot it on your phone, stage it, do the reading in your home, and now you have something to play with. Now you have something to pitch to Jamil. Now you have something that you can kind of bargain with. So yes, we absolutely need the spaces, we need the platforms, but then the artist has to also do their own due diligence to bet on themselves and create something, package it where it's something that is interesting, where it's something that people want to give you space and time, because we know opportunities and spaces are limited. When you get that opportunity to sit down and pitch to an artistic director, it has to be something that is somewhat proven, you know? So I'm all for shooting your shot, being prepared, being ready, and of course, there have to be spaces for us to do so.
You know, and I also want to advocate, right, like there is more work that can happen, right? We need to do a better job of marketing the Black arts organizations that are out there, right? There are so many. If you look at the Black Seed, which is a funding group, was an initiative that to raise and support over 100 Black arts organizations, the Black Seed. So go and Google the Black Seed, and you'll see there are 100 Black arts organizations. You have at least 100 Black arts organizations that you can reach out to, and understanding that if their organizations are like mine, We are extremely understaffed, and I am notoriously bad about email. So it just isn't one email. It is a second email. It is a third email. It is going when we are at our offices to knock. And yes, some may say, well, why do I have to do that? Hey, the thing that I've had to learn is that I am not entitled to my artistry, right? Like I can do it, but I'm not entitled to being able to have someone else produce my work, right? So I want to encourage more people to go and do the research on all the Black arts organizations that are out there and take advantage of them. Right now we have auditions open for Raisin, that I'll talk about a little bit later. We have our Divinely Connected commissions where we're commissioning new early career artists. There are those opportunities, but we all have to do a better job. Black arts organizations, we have to do a better job of marketing those opportunities, let people know, but we also have to do a better job of just in general of knowing who else is out there. The Black Seed is out there, y'all. Continue to go look up those organizations to find ways to get your work. Y'all, as we are coming, Dr. Millett, go ahead.
I just want to say in terms of this that I didn't think of it when I was running my mouth. I had to hear somebody else. There's also this phenomenon called do it yourself.
Yes.
Most Black playwrights that I know self-produced the first thing they ever got done with no money, with $0. And, you know, I mentioned Abe Hill and Strivers Row. First production of Strivers Row was a pass the hat. People put money in the hat, and, you know, most of the people that put money in that hat later became the leaders among Black folks in the New York theater business. But they started off putting money in a hat, getting this show put on in the basement at the Harlem Library, and nobody got any money. But sometimes that's what you have to do in order to prove that you can do it.
Yeah, and prove it to yourself. Definitely to that, and there's a world of abundance, right? Like we don't only have to just do it ourselves. We can advocate for funding. We can be funded. We can get those types of opportunities. So it is important. Yes, we get to do it ourselves, and also there's enough abundance in the world that we can get more people to support that work. Doing it yourself does not let people off the hook. We are not telling funding communities and individual donations and donors to let you off the hook. Go ahead and continue to support the work. Do it yourself is of value. I got a lot of experience and feel really confident in doing the work that I'm doing now by doing it myself. And also, I know that I was helped along the way by people who saw the vision, wanted to support the vision, and there's a world of abundance here. You all, before we go back to a final presentation from Mr. Magby, and if there are any questions out there, please get them to me. I want to just go down the line. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Infantry, just to ask you, what type of Black stories do we want to see?
Okay.
What type of Black stories do we want to see in the future? What type of work that we want to create? You know, we're here in Sankofa, and it's to go back and get it, but there's a journey forward that Sankofa bird is taking us to. So as we create new Black futures and we think about the next 70-something years of the 21st century, what type of Black art do you want to see?
Two things. One, I want to see work where we win. Because we're making it up. It's all imagination. So just write the ending where we win. I want to see Queen and Slim get away with that shit.
Yes.
Okay? So there's that. And then two, I want playwrights and artists to imagine a world where white folks never existed. And within that world, I want to understand what the Black characters think and feel, what they fear, what they hope for, what they imagine for themselves, what they do in their day-to-day life. Like, I want someone to conceive that world for me.
That's amazing, man. I want that world too. Dr. Millett, what type of Black work do you want to see for our future? What type of Black arts organizations? What do you want to see as we look forward to the journey ahead?
Well, to me, the biggest problem has always been this issue of funding. And I want to see some Black organizations that have enough money to do what the artistic director really wants to do.
You know, I thought you were about to drop the F-bomb in there, and I was so excited. I was ready. I was like, yes, let's do it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I really want. I want to see plays where the Black people win.
Yes.
I've written a couple of plays where the Black people win and been told that's not commercial. But that's why I became a college professor, so I could keep on writing what I wanted to write and not worry about buying groceries and keep, But anyway, I guess I totally got myself off track.
That's all right. You
it's
said some of my favorite words. You want to see theaters that are funded so that the artistic director can do what they want to do, and I want to see that too. All right, truecolorstheater.org/donate. Miss Diana, what do you want to see for the future of Black theater?
I like people winning. I like us winning. But I also think that in the future that we're going to be using technology and that it's going to be more multimedia, multi-technology driven.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Tina, please bring us home. What type of future do you want to see for Black arts organizations, Black artists, Black theaters? What you want to see in the future?
I want to see a future where we are funded by our own people. Like, I want to see where we don't have to go and beg folks that don't look like us, who don't understand us, who don't understand our art. I want to see us be so abundant in having access, that's been my word of the day, where, you know, if True Colors gets $1 million, they can break out and give 5 organizations, you know, 150,000, you know, where it can be funded within the community. We are supporting the community, we're growing the community. And I just want to see artists have access to wins, you know, like Heather said, the narrative for us is so limited right now, and we are just a wonderful people. We're so much greater than what we're being confined to doing in a lot of situations. So we need to be paying for our own stuff.
Yeah, and again, shout out to the Black Seed for they're doing a lot of that great work. Mr. Magby, I know you aren't on the panel, but you do have a mic here. What type of Black art do you want to see here in the future?
I definitely have to just echo seeing when we win. I just don't think that's a big thing that we get to see. I feel like it's full of Black pain. I'd like to see original Black musicals. That's my biggest passion. And also, I just have to say, as a baby of the Youth Ensemble of Atlanta, I am thrilled to be in such the presence of so many kings and queens. So thank you guys for sharing that with us today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Magby. Go ahead, please give us another blessing from that piano and that keyboard you got.
Broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, but you can't find the fighter. But I see it in you, and we gon' walk it out and move mountains. We gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. I'll rise up, high like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet and move mountains. We'll bring it to its feet and move mountains. And we'll rise up, rise like the day. We'll rise up, rise unafraid. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times each other. We'll rise up, rise like the day. We'll rise up, rise unafraid. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. We'll rise up, high like the waves. We'll rise up, rise unafraid. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, from you, for you.
Y'all, once again, that was Mr. Christian Magby. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for all of the amazing artistry that you have brought here for us today. Thank you for that final message, that idea of rising up. You know, as we look to that Sankofa bird, on the legs of that bird, that's amazing narrative painting by Mr. Aaron Henderson. He has the words Bennu. And Bennu, and when it was translated into the Greeks later, it was kind of came the word for phoenix, a bird rising up. And here we are here in the city of Atlanta, a city that is about rebirth and generation. We are talking about, you know, here we don't have to worry about coming up from the ashes because we have an amazing, fertile legacy that our organizations and our artists have come from. I want to thank Heather Infantry. I want to thank Dr. Carlton Millett. I want to thank Miss Diana Jones-Stevens. And I want to thank Miss Tina Fears on our amazing panel. Thank you all very much for bringing us back, going back and getting all of the things that we may have forgotten about who we are as a people, as an art industry, and as a community, and helping us set the path forward. Thank you all so very much for joining me today. There are a couple people that I also want to shout out. Again, I want to shout out Mr. Aaron Henderson. You will be able to see our Sankofa bird for Go Back and Get It. He will do 3 of these for each season of our Sankofa season. I want to thank Mr. Henderson for his amazing work. I want to thank Zuccotti Gallery, again, the largest Black-owned gallery, art gallery here in the Southeast. Shout out to Zuccotti here, just in Castleberry Hill, here in Atlanta, Georgia. So thank you again. Big shout out to our sponsors for this, Brian Cave, Layden Paisner. It always helps to have a lawyer on your side. So thank you, Brian Cave, Layden Paisner Law Firm, for supporting our community conversations and being our sponsor. Also, shout out to Hammonds House, y'all. One more time for Hammonds House for being amazing guests for us. Thank you, Dr. Karen, for your stewardship of this organization and for being an amazing partner for us and allowing us to use this beautiful space as we talk about going back and getting. There's nothing like being here in the historic West End here in Atlanta. A couple other shout-outs I want to give. Ty Def Studios, they are manning the cameras, the still photography, the live video feed has all been manned by Ty Def Studios and that team, as well as Multiband Studios. Big shout-out to Chris Lane and his team for making us all sound so good. Thank you all very, very much for that. What our community conversations have been beneficiaries, that's the word I was looking for, beneficiaries of the amazing work of Hands in Motion. So big shout out to Ms. Marsha Coles Felix and Ms. Monique Sutherland of Hands in Motion. Thank you for making sure that our work is accessible and that we can continue to do what Ms. Tina said, create more access opportunities for people. You know, here at True Colors, we say that we thrive at the intersection of artistic excellence and civic engagement, and our community conversations are really key to a lot of that work. So I want to thank all of the staff at True Colors, especially Mr. Brandon Jones, who helps put these things together, because it is because of this work that we're able to do this work. Even in the midst of a pandemic, we're able to do the important work of the Black Arts Organization to center Black narratives, focus on the Black storytelling lens, and use it as a means to talk about the things that are happening. In our call earlier, Heather talked about that here in Atlanta, we are facing all of the issues that our nation is facing, societal issues that our nation faces, we face right here in Atlanta. And that's why I believe that I have the best job in the American theater as the artistic director of an organization that focuses on its civic engagement and only matches that with our artistic excellence. You all, I want you to be part of what we do here at True Colors. I mentioned earlier, there are auditions that are online. Go to truecolorstheater.org and audition for our winter musical, Raisin. I want you to be in that show. You can go online, truecolorstheater.org, and look for the Raisin auditions. We are also looking for the next star. If you know a 10-year-old or anybody who can believably be 10, Tell them about our Raisin auditions. We're looking for a young black male to be our Travis in Raisin. So on October 2nd and October 3rd, down at the Southwest Arts Center, our home in the Cascade Corridor, we're going to be auditioning for that Raisin. So if you know that 10-year-old who's on the couch, maybe playing PlayStation, maybe on Dr. Millett's Instagram page right now, tell them to go and audition for our Raisin the Musical, October 2nd and October 3rd. And we are looking for all of those roles in Raisins. Again, more information can be found on our website, truecolorstheater.org. Our next community conversation will happen again online for you all. That will be in partnership with the Atlanta History Center, and that we're going to talk about preserving our history. We're going to talk about teaching Black theater history, both at HBCUs and at predominantly white institutions. You don't want to miss that conversation. We're going to hold that on the 20th of October, right here on the same YouTube channel. Y'all, there's a plethora of work that's happening at True Colors, be it online, and like I said earlier, go get vaccinated so you can join us on November 30th when we kick off Marie and Rosetta, the first live production of our season 19. Go back and get it. Y'all, thank you for rocking with us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed facilitating it. Again, thank you to all the people who put this together, and thank you, our patrons online. I'll see you all next time.